Hey, Dad.
What, Logan?
When the Dalai Lama dies, what do they write on his headstone?
Does he get a headstone?
And for this joke, he does.
Okay, so what do they write on it?
BRB.
No. No.
Rude.
You're listening to The Wayward Willis with Jon and Logan, where two atheists discuss religion, culture, and maybe some politics. If you're offended by blasphemy, profanity, or you hate fun, this podcast may not be right for you. And now, on to the show.
Hey, you.
It's us.
The original rump shakers.
Let there be Jon.
Let there be Logan.
And there were both, and they were good.
But also a little bit naughty.
This week, we're talking about creationism.
So, what even is creationism?
Well, the dictionary defines creationism as a doctrine or theory holding that matter, the various forms of life, and the world were created by God out of nothing, and usually in the way described in Genesis.
The English rock band?
No, the Sega Genesis. It was created out of nothing.
Nice.
Usage of the term creationism is a mostly American construct and has been the center of controversy over the Big Bang Theory and the theory of evolution between fundamentalist Christians and secularists for at least the past 90 years.
Which was around the time that Charles Lindbergh broke new ground in aviation when he flew the Spirit of St. Louis across the Atlantic. Coincidence? I think not.
Or maybe yes. The controversy stems from the Christian idea that the Big Bang and evolution are incompatible with the biblical account of creation. And since the Bible is always right, teaching these theories leads to, devil worship and eugenics or something.
Yes, you heard that right, children. Believing in the Big Bang Theory makes you a fascist.
Well, now you're just making it seem like fun. The idea that the Bible is a science book, though, can't even be supported by believers, because they've constantly got to resort to admitting that certain things are allegory when they're exposed as ridiculous.
Science can be allegorical, though. Like Rudolph, for example, is a commentary on the subject of genetic adaptation and the survival of the fittest. Or something.
Or survival of the flyest.
Like, fly as fuck? Like the coolest people are the ones who survived the most.
There are so many problems with creationism, it's hard to talk about them all in one sitting.
Kind of like Nickelback.
You got that right. But the biggest problem is that the entire basis of creationism is a misunderstanding of what the Big Bang and evolution by natural selection even have to say, as well as the conflation of the two theories, and, to muddy the waters even more, what a scientific theory is in the first place. So, let's talk about what a scientific theory is and demonstrate why creationism isn't scientific.
Let alone allegorically scientific.
A scientific theory is an explanation based on observation of the evidence and repeated tests. The strength of a scientific theory is judged on its predictive power and explanatory ability.
The strongest of theories can explain why Donald Trump is the president of the United States right now.
Nope. No theory would be strong enough to explain that one. But for a theory to be valid, it must be able to make specific predictions about the natural world that can be falsified. That is, there must be testable conditions under which the theory would fail. And it needs to provide an explanation consistent with pre-existing scientific knowledge. That's why scientific theories are different from the colloquial usage of the word, which is synonymous with guessing. You could say, I have a theory that Daddy Trumpo is a lizard person, but a scientist wouldn't say that.
That claim is backed up in the New Testament, though.
Call back.
New Testament.
So, if a scientific theory has to make testable predictions and explain something without begging more and more ridiculous questions, you can already see why creationism isn't actually a theory. If you say, a magic man magicked everything into existence, you're not explaining anything, you're avoiding the question.
Unless you asked a question about Penn and Teller, in which case that's as good an answer as any.
That would be magic men, Logan. Men.
Magic Mike?
No.
Wait, is that different?
Yeah, that's just a bad movie. Plus, using the Magic Man as the explanation doesn't provide any predictions about what the Magic Man has done or will do. If it's possible to suspend the laws of nature, then anything at all could happen, and you would expect the world to look way different than it does. How do you gain any consistent knowledge about the world if tomorrow you could wake up with the sun in the west and a T-Rex in your garage eating moon rocks?
These are the kinds of problems I wish I had. I could use a little fantasy in my life.
You could always pretend this podcast is making money.
Ooh, business roasted. Ooh.
So creationists dislike the Big Bang Theory because it takes God out of the equation when discussing the origins of the universe. They also dislike it, though, because the name is confusing and they think it literally means an explosion happened and all of a sudden the Earth was spinning around the sun.
Usually they don't dislike the show The Big Bang Theory, though. Not really related at all, just worth noting.
Moving on. There's an argument against the Big Bang thrown around like shit at the primate house that supposes the Big Bang is like a tornado blowing through a junkyard and assembling a fully functional 747.
Fake news.
This argument is especially attractive to people like Ken Ham, William Lane Craig, and Kent Hovind because it doesn't require any investigation into what the Big Bang actually proposes. The kind of order you find in a 747 isn't the kind of order you find in the universe. Every part of an airplane is engineered to do a specific thing in support of the overall structure, which has a single purpose.
Nerd alert. In fact, my job specializes in ensuring the pinpoint accuracy of each component of an airplane down to the nuts and bolts. A tornado probably could not do my job without at least 5 months of technical training, and I don't know many people who would be willing to train and certify a tornado.
I feel like you just wouldn't be able to. I mean, the tornado would just spin in its chair the whole time, throwing papers on the floor and not even listen to you.
These are the problems you think you would have with training a tornado?
Yeah, but you're basically just a nerd. An airplane wouldn't function properly with chaotic elements crashing into each other. So the universe is governed by physical laws, but ultimately doesn't have a single purpose like an airplane. If it did, then every planet would probably have life on it, and the surface of every planet would be optimized for the type of life it contains. We know that's just not the case, and that dismantles the predictability of the creationist argument. The junkyard tornado is similar to the watchmaker argument, which goes like this. If you're strolling along the beach on a remote, desolate island, and you come across a pocket watch, or to put it in more modern terms, an Apple Watch, you wouldn't assume that the watch just naturally happened or that it made itself. You would properly assume that there was a watchmaker, or a company named Apple, who made it.
His name was Artemis Fletcher, and he was the best damn watchmaker that the island had ever seen. That is, of course, until the incident.
Weirdo. This is a poor analogy because we all know what a watch is, and we all know how watches happen. We don't know what a universe is supposed to be, or how it's supposed to work, though. We only know how our universe looks and works, mostly. The analogy is also bad because it assumes there's an obvious, distinctive trait of creation that makes you think it was created by someone or something purposefully.
I mean, think about platypuses. Who in their right mind purposefully made those funny little guys?
Well, if I created the world, it would be 100% platypi.
And they would all be named Perry. Agent P!
Moving on. The problem is that the watch is sitting on top of sand next to water full of fish. So is there a sand maker and water maker and fish maker in addition to this watchmaker?
Does that make Artemis's mother a watchmaker maker?
It could. And what exactly distinguishes the form and structure of the watch from the form and structure of a grain of sand, or a sand dune if we're presuming creators? It just doesn't explain anything, so it's not useful.
But one day we'll find Artemis's diary. That's the day we'll know the truth.
Until apologists claim that it's partly allegory in order to explain Fitbits.
No, too real. You made it too real.
Oh, sorry, Artemis. So this bad analogy is also used to try and discredit the theories of abiogenesis and evolution, because it presumes that if something comes about and looks designed, it couldn't possibly have happened naturally by accident or chance. It's an all-purpose sauce, like Country Bob's.
Or ranch dressing.
The reason this works for creationists is that they don't understand that these three theories are completely separate and explain completely different processes by completely different means. If you get into an argument with a creationist,
which isn't advisable,
you're going to hear them jump from one theory to another and back again as they explain why they think God is the best explanation for everything. Because their worldview dictates that humans are the pinnacle of creation, evolution is the inevitable target of all their outrage. Have you ever heard someone ask, if we evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? Well, in one question, they've summed up their entire intellectual capacity and their fundamental misunderstanding of evolution.
I mean, think about it. Have you ever seen a human and a monkey in the same room at the same time? Then clearly they aren't the same thing. Case closed.
Well, with a quick Google search, you could easily figure out that apes and humans both share a common ancestor who was ape-like, much like you and your cousins share grandparents who are you-like. That doesn't mean that your cousins become you and stop being your cousins.
It would be really strange if that were the case.
You're not wrong. But I wonder if they view this kind of like that scene in Time Cop where Van Damme throws the bad guy into his past self and he melts into oblivion because the same matter can't occupy the same space.
You know, I wasn't even a twinkle in your eye when that movie came out.
Yeah, we get it. I'm old.
Yes.
But it would be funny if a human touches a bonobo and they just explode into confetti.
And that's how nuclear power plants work, kids.
It's like perpetual energy. All you have to do is just throw a bonobo party and invite all your friends.
But not the ones you like.
No. Another problem with arguing with creationists is that they don't have to be an expert in their field to assume a magic man made stuff. But they expect you to be a scientist and offer detailed explanations on every point of the science refuting their arguments, even though you both know that no matter how well you could explain it to them, they'd never accept it anyway.
That's basically the debate version of, I know you are, but what am I?
It's more like sticking your fingers in your ears and saying, la, 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 la. But just because you're an atheist doesn't mean you're a scientist.
And even if you are a scientist, that doesn't mean you have to be an English major too, Mr. Fancy Pants Allegorical Scientist.
Just because you accept the Big Bang, abiogenesis, and evolution as the most useful and plausible explanations for our universe doesn't mean you have to have tested them yourself.
But it does help your argument if you have.
True. Entire fields of medicine and astrophysics rely on these theories, and those fields have produced tangible, functional results because these theories are part of the building blocks of current science. Not all creationists are created equally, even just within Christian sects. There are basically two types of creationists, Old Earth and Young Earth.
Is it just me or does that sound like a 70s R&B group?
No. The Old Earth creationists believe that scientific timelines aren't inaccurate and that the Genesis account of creation of the universe and the Earth can be explained by poetic phrasing, such as, a day for God is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as a day.
I wish that were true. There's not enough time in a day if you ask me. 1,000 years might be a little bit of an overcorrection, but I'll take it.
There is definitely enough time in a workday, though.
Oh, absolutely. That in and of itself is 1,000 years.
It's like 1,000,000 years. It's an eon. So essentially, when the Bible says God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, it may as well be saying it took him 6 billion years.
I'm not sure your math adds up there.
I don't math. For Old Earth creationists, the biblical account of creation doesn't contradict what the science says. It just rephrases it into a narrative. Most Old Earth creationists accept scientific evidence that the universe is 13.8 billion years old without any argument, but counter that God still made it regardless.
Because YOLO, etc.
Because magic, etc.
The answer, of course, is aliens.
I like it. Young Earth creationists, however, hold to a literal 6-day creation account and deny any evidence to the contrary. Using genealogy in the Old Testament, they calculate that creation happened just over 6,000 years ago when God poofed it into existence.
At least they're using some sort of science to back up their claims, even if it is horribly misguided.
People like Ken Ham and Eric Hovind will argue against evidence until they're dumb in the face because they don't want to admit that the Bible may have been written by ignorant ancients who were barely literate, let alone scientific.
The ancient ones.
That's what happens when you put all of your trust in the applicability of a 2,000-year-old book to present day when the book hasn't been revised in, ever.
I'm still waiting for the second edition core rulebook to come out before I get invested in this fantasy world.
Nerd. You get a bunch of people lobbying for school vouchers so nuns can have more knuckles to smack with their rulers.
Dude, that sounds like an activist group. Nucks for nuns, where nuns is spelled with a silent K.
I think nuns need, nunchucks.
Nuckchucks?
I don't know.
Good try.
That just doesn't work for me. Other religions view creation slightly differently than Christianity. Islam holds that the biblical account is just wrong. Like in My Cousin Vinny, when Joe Pesci's entire opening statement is, everything that guy said is bullshit.
Ah, such a good movie. Even if it is before my time, you old man.
It's a good movie for all ages through all of time.
Okay, fine, but the important point here is that you're old.
I thought we had established that.
In fact, I was referencing you earlier when I said the ancient ones.
Oh, you
Roasted.
asshole.
Roasted!
So, by keeping their creation account a little vaguer, they can claim interpretations that seem not to contradict science quite as much. Any discrepancies between science and the Qur'an are said to be a misinterpretation of the scripture.
Just like when your teacher finds wrong answers on your test, you can tell them that they just misinterpreted your responses.
I dare you to try that.
Doing it. Bet. Manchester.
Jews appear not to care too much about how long the earth has been around, and the Torah is considered to be 100% true even when science contradicts it. The discrepancies between the Torah and science are said to be a product of the limitations of humans to properly discern the true meaning of the Torah. So you can kind of just wave your hand and be like, nah, that science is what the Torah actually says, if only you had the ability to read it the way God does, or something like that.
I honestly prefer this method. We're all just too dumb to fully comprehend the words on this page.
You are.
Rude.
Jews would be an example of old Earth creationists and fit into the God's days are a different length than ours category. But Hindus believe that, for all we know, the universe may be trillions of years old or even older. They're pretty mystical about their beliefs and how everything got here, but they hold that humans didn't evolve from primate ancestors. Because all living things are made of pure consciousness, whatever that means, humans appeared as humans, separate from the rest of the plant and animal kingdom. There's an interesting property of the Baha'i faith that seems to be the most compatible with science out of all the religions. They believe that all of the matter in the universe has always existed and will always exist, which is more like matter can neither be created nor destroyed, and closer to what I would believe as a naturalist.
Not to be confused with being a naturist. He's not into nudism. I'm pretty sure, at least. Right? Nope, never mind. Don't even want to think about it.
Haha, just turn the video on.
No.
Things that scar your child for life. So, they accepted that humans evolved from a primate ancestor, and that potential for human consciousness has always existed, but didn't manifest until whenever humans happened.
When the universe made a big ta-da sound.
Like the Windows 95 sound?
Oh, no.
What? What was that noise?
I tried to emulate it, and then I did so poorly that I just silenced myself.
Oh, you fail. All of these stances on creation and evolution are an interesting glimpse into the different mindsets of different people and cultures. But aside from feeding into some good jokes...
Well, I wouldn't go as far as to say good.
You're not wrong. These views aren't useful. As I said before, the reason scientific explanations for these things win over theistic explanations is that science actually leads to discoveries and practical applications.
Like circumnavigating buffet lines.
Or just going straight through them. Just bulldoze. Just.
That's not a very efficient way to get your food, though.
You just like jump up on it with a spoon and just start digging in.
Just rowing through the buffet line.
Yeah. Back to the topic. Theistic explanations just tell stories, period. No matter how hard creationists fight to have creationism taught in schools, we should fight them with everything we've got.
Like nuclear weapons.
No, like facts.
Nope. I'm calling Daddy Trumpo. Shoot.
No, he'll actually do it.
Go. Start with China.
No. Creationism just can't be taught in schools because it doesn't further our understanding or explain anything and just ends up making us all dumber. Schools are for learning, not fantasizing about magic universe incantations.
Except for Hogwarts.
Fact. Ron, stop. This week, we're interviewing Aron Ra, skeptic, atheist, self-educated science enthusiast, and candidate for Texas Senate. We're really happy to have you giving us some of your time, Aron.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you. So one of the reasons that I really wanted to have you on here is this is our creationism episode. So we're just kind of going through some of the creation beliefs and myths and some of the arguments that they put forward.
If you call them that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can argue pretty much anything, right?
Oh-ho.
Yeah, it's just that, creationism is based almost entirely on logical fallacies and misinformation.
Yeah.
I sometimes summarize that creationism is based on fallacies, falsehoods, and frauds.
Which is actually a good segue into what I wanted to talk to you about. So you've got a video series on YouTube called Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism. And these videos are fantastic. But I wanted you to just kind of say or tell us who's the target audience for these videos.
The target audience for these videos is there's two of them, actually. And I have to tell you that the videos were expanded. A few years ago, I was at an American Humanist Association meeting in New Orleans, and a book publisher walked up, introduced himself, and asked me to write a book. Handed me a check for a couple of $1,000s just to get started, and asked me to do a book version of the Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism video series. He said that I go through the information in the videos so fast that nobody knows what I'm talking about, that I have a lot of compacted information, and they wanted to know what are the details about all the things that I'm showing in the videos. Could I please explain what I'm going on? Because even when people still pause on the video, they still can't get the full gist of what was going on there. So I said, okay, I'll do that. And so I wrote a 15-chapter book. And a lot of people don't want to know what I put down, and so they try to dismiss that, that it's all straw man fallacies. And I really hate when creationists tell me, or Christians in general, because we argue about religion quite a lot. They always tell me that I'm straw manning their position. No, I'm absolutely not. If I tell you that you believe in a fable, it's because you believe in a folklorish story with a moral that includes these fanciful characters like witches and wizards and dragons and giants and talking animals. And that is exactly what you believe. That is really, literally, honestly what you believe.
Right, not just talking animals, but talking bushes as well.
Well, yeah, exactly. So that's what a fable is. Go look it up. And another thing, people say that I'm straw-manning religion on the point of when I call it magic. No, sorry. Every supernatural explanation, whether it's witchcraft or whether it's even psionics, if you will. I mean, when there's a cursed potion in one story and there's a ritual spell that you have to do in another story, like to cure leprosy in Leviticus, where you have to slaughter the bird, give it blood sacrifice, and hold it under running water in an earthenware bowl, and then release a second bird dripped in blood from the first blood. We release that that's a magical spell. Okay,
right.
That's a component spell. And then you have these other things where you have this like an enchantment where you can speak something out of nothing. Or if you have the golem spell, which is have the clay figurine and then you breathe into it the breath of life and you cast the spell on that. Sorry, that's a golem spell. These are magic spells, right? So that this is magic. Every supernatural explanation, whatever kind, is equivalent to magic. And I know that the religious people do not ever want to admit that miracles and magic are the same damn thing, but yes, they are. The only difference between magic and miracle is whether a god did it or whether a man did it. That's it.
Right. And it's really difficult to explain to believers that anytime that you suspend the laws of reality, that's magic. And, but when
Exactly.
you use the word magic, it just kind of shuts them down because they're like, oh, now you're just making fun of me. And so in a way, you kind of come to realize that they even understand how ridiculous it is, but they just can't divorce themselves from it.
Nobody makes the connection. But of course, what is it? We have to come up with definitions. And I find that this is a big problem that I have, because people don't want to listen to that. They don't want there to be definitions. They want to misuse every word because, as I said, every logical fallacy has been used as an argument for God. I mean, go through the list of logical fallacies. Every one of them is a common argument for God. And every argument for God is also a logical fallacy, and that's where we're at.
Right.
So, I mean, I have to come up with definitions to get people to understand that when I say fable, when I say that you're believing in a fairy tale, it literally is that. If I say fable, it's literally accurate. If I say myth, it's literally accurate. And I can show that I'm using these words correctly. And then when they tell me that, that macroevolution is something coming from nothing, No, that plainly is not. Let's look up on any scientific site what that word really means.
Right.
And the problem with that is...
That's one of the things that Logan and I were talking about was how misrepresented and misunderstood all of these scientific theories are by creationists. And so they will, tear into the Big Bang, or they'll tear into evolution, and then they'll mention the Big Bang or evolution on the converse. And you're like, wait a minute, which one are you talking about? Because you don't understand that they're completely different.
Yeah, and let's just look at the word theory that you just mentioned. This is another one of those deliberate misrepresentations where theory suddenly becomes a blind-ass guess.
Right.
Yeah.
And there is a different way that scientists will describe proof. For example, if you use the legal definition of proof, a scientific definition would be that positive proof is only available in mathematics. You can't positively prove something otherwise.
Right.
But if you look at a legal definition, lawyers will try a case based on an overwhelming preponderance of evidence. That's what they call proof. They're going to prove beyond reasonable doubt. There's no such thing as 100% proof. So that's another thing that creationists have sticking points with. They need absolutely no information, no justification at all to believe the impossible horse shit that they buy into with absolute conviction, but they need 100% proof that they can't be right before they'll accept anything else. This is a ridiculous double standard. But when we're talking about proof, and I don't mean to sidetrack here, if you have an overwhelming preponderance of evidence beyond reasonable doubt, that's what proof is. And in order for anything to qualify as a theory anymore, like say in the last 200 years, a hypothesis kind of has to be proven in the colloquial sense, not in the scientific sense, but in the colloquial sense. A hypothesis has to be proven before it can graduate to the level of theory. And this is something creationists don't understand. That means that every one of the theories that they can list in history that have been debunked, which were all debunked in the 1600s or the 1700s, and we haven't created theories that were that weak since then. But all of those that were debunked were usually based on religion, and that was the first foundational problem that they had. But they were all replaced with a more modern theory that is also a proven fact. For example, George Stahl came up with the idea of phlogiston, which, trying to come up with an explanation for why things burn is because they all contain this mystical chemical called phlogiston, and that ash and rust are both the residue of dephlogisticated stuff. So that you release the phlogiston into the air, and whatever is left is your ash or your rust. Right? You following what that is? So
kind of.
So this other guy, and I can't remember his name because it's French and it's really long, but this other guy came along and came up with the theory of oxygen, and that disproved phlogiston and disrupted a whole bunch of people's reality. But anyway, oxygen was proposed as a theory, and it is still a theory. Oxygen. It's not like we can't prove that oxygen exists.
Right.
We know that oxygen exists. Same thing with spontaneous generation. Another of George Stahl's ideas was based on vitalism, the idea that every living organism was animated by a spirit of some sort, and that this was tied in with spontaneous generation, that what then this fluid-like spirit would ebb out of dying bodies and would turn into mice or maggots or mold or something like that. And Louis Pasteur disproved all that, and so we had him and, oddly enough, a creationist replaced that with two other concepts, or the replacement of spontaneous generation was abiogenesis, and the replacement of vitalism was Louis Pasteur's cell theory or germ theory of disease. So germ theory. Is it a theory that germs cause disease, or is it a fact that germs cause disease? Well, what about atoms? Are they just a theory, or do atomic bombs really blow up? Does nuclear power really work? And we can prove that it does, and we can prove how and why it does, right?
And we're probably going to see it here pretty soon, too.
Yeah, so don't worry about it. It's just atomic theory. So, it's just a theory. So, and then theory of relativity, theory of gravity, for example. The cell theory. Anybody heard of a cell theory? The theory that the basis of all life on Earth is the cell. These are all theories, but they are also fact, because each of these is a hypothesis that has been proven in the colloquial sense, because they have withstood a overwhelming preponderance of evidence or battery of tests. So the greatest minds of the modern age have tried every way they could to prove it wrong. And even though they have a means of falsification, if it is wrong, all attempts to do so have failed. Now, with creationism, you can prove creationism wrong any number of ways in a moment. You don't even need a time machine. As a matter of fact, it's faster to disprove it without a time machine than if you had one.
Because all you have to do is find a crocoduck, right?
Yeah, that's another irony. If you want to prove evolution wrong, find the thing that the creationists say would prove it right.
Right.
Because
yeah, exactly.
they are deliberately misrepresenting everything they can. And this is an important statement I want to express to you, because there are going to be creationists who hopefully there will be some creationists listening to your show or who read my book. I want to reach out to the creationists because there are people who believe what they do honestly. There are. But it is not possible to defend creationism honestly, because it is not true, and it's not just not true, it is deliberately dishonest. So when people tell me that they always want to do the false equivalent thing, they want to create this illusion of false equivalence where they say that, well, you believe in science on faith, so you're just as bad as we are. No. Science is the antithesis of faith, and then we have to go into a whole argument about what faith is. Well, my faith is based on evidence. No, it fucking isn't. The definition of faith is that you're going to believe whatever the fuck you want to believe, regardless what the evidence is. And I could prove it wrong, and you're just going to put your hands over your ears and say, I'm going to believe it anyway. And I've had people do that to me face to face numerous times across my life. I've seen people admit this in public record, that it doesn't matter what the truth is. They're going to believe what they want to believe. That's what faith is.
Right. Well, and so, the sad thing about that is it's not just as simple as saying they'll believe whatever they want to believe, because in some cases they don't even know what they want to believe, or they don't even know what they do believe. They've just been taught, they've been trained from a very young age, especially in this country, to just accept what they're told, and that, this book is the authority. And even though it hasn't been revised in 2,000 years, it's still right today. And, so they just end up having to accept it. And because they have to accept it, they also have to defend it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so a lot of these people will say that, evolution is a fairy tale for grown-ups, which of course only backfires because we're not the ones with the talking animals, the giants, the wizards, and the magic spells, right? And so they want to say that evolution is a fraud, right? And they'll cite one or two examples of what they think constitutes an evolutionary fraud. Now, there are frauds, or people who have tried to defraud the British Museum of Natural History, and we don't know what motives might have been, but it clearly wasn't to promote evolution over creationism, because the victim of that fraud, of the Piltdown Man fraud, the famous one,
yes,
that was the British Museum of Natural History. They were the victims there. So evolution was the victim of that fraud. And also, evolutionary scientists were the ones to figure that fraud out, because creationists don't even know how to expose a fraud. If they did, there wouldn't be any creationists.
Right.
Yeah. So the creationists will want to argue that that they have the absolute truth when there's actually not a word of truth in their position at all. Nothing that is verifiably true. Like, you can ask people, show me the truth of it, because I can show you, the truth is what the facts are. I can show you the truth of evolution. I mean, we have all kinds of facts that are exclusively, concordant with evolution, or supportive of, positively indicative of evolution. And they also, contradict the creationist alternative. But there is not a single fact that creationists can claim that is either indicative of creation or even that stands against evolution, except, for their gross distortion or upside down parodies of it, right? Because that's where they try to change the laws of evolution. And yes, there are laws of evolution because it's a natural science like anything else. They want to, change it around to, to where it means something from nothing, or one thing turning into another completely different thing, which evolution would never allow.
Right.
But that, and the crocoduck is, again, something that evolution would never allow. And if they'd ever read Darwin, they would know that. But and the crocoduck guy, Ray Comfort, who came up with this idea, he wrote a 50-page foreword to Darwin's book on a reissue of what was it, the 150-year anniversary or 200-year anniversary of his book.
Right.
Ray Comfort wrote a 50-page foreword on it, and obviously didn't read the book, because the book that he wrote the foreword to refutes everything he said in the foreword.
Right.
So he's an idiot. Or no, he's not, because he's making $4 million a year telling the same stupid lie to these people, and so he has a beach house in Malibu.
You can be an idiot and still make that much money.
Yeah, but you kind of have to question, if all you have to do for a living is just lie to people, and just not have any morals or scruples about that, then I don't. Maybe stupid isn't the word. Maybe there's another derogatory term, but it isn't necessarily your lack of intellect. Because I don't have a $4 million beach house. I don't get to walk into a 7,500 seat stadium church and get paid an average person's annual wages for 30 minutes of bullshitting.
No, but can you imagine how much money you would rake in if one day you were just like, "Hey, everybody, I've seen the light.
I found Jesus.
I found Jesus." And then you go on tours. Oh my God, you'd be rolling in it.
Yeah, and what is the only reason that I don't do that? Again, scruples.
Yep. Well, it's really
I was
to
going to
me
make a
that
point.
you could be an atheist and have any kind of moral compass whatsoever.
Oh, I love that one. My very first speaking gig was in Florida somewhere. I was invited by the James Randi Educational Foundation. And the presentation that I gave was the evolution of morality, because I find that whole argument so ill. If the only reason that you're not killing and raping people is because you think there's an inescapable, indomitable despot watching your every move, then I want you to keep believing that. You obviously have no morality to start with.
Right. And I think that's the point I would make is, if the thought of eternal damnation is the only thing that keeps you from being a bad person, then you're basically just a bad person anyway.
Exactly.
So you were really young then when you started falling in love with science and really getting into it. So what did you think that you were going to do when you grew up?
Well, I could draw. And so I was raised by people that didn't think logically. I was not raised by scientifically minded people. I was the only non-creationist I had ever met until middle school, honestly.
Okay.
I had never met another person who didn't believe in Noah's Ark. And even I believed in Noah's Ark until I was 14. I didn't believe in creationism. I didn't believe that animals were created, but somehow I believed in Noah's Ark because absolutely everybody in my world all believed that. And I had to meet a math teacher who was just really blunt about it. So when I mentioned something about the ark, he laughed in my face and said there was never an ark.
Oh.
And I remember feeling stupid. And he just told me, think about it for a minute. And really it didn't take much more than that, because really it's Noah's Ark. I mean, come on, that's the worldwide flood. It really doesn't take more than, hey, just think about it for a minute.
Right.
But I've never done that.
Yeah, if you ask somebody about the Bible, regardless of their background, I think that Noah's Ark is the one story they can definitely tell you about.
Yeah, and it's the most ridiculous one, and it's the easiest one to disprove, and it's not like there's any hope or option or maybe there's just an interpretation or this didn't happen. There was no global flood, and if there was an isolated flood somewhere on which this fable is based, well, then we're talking about exaggerations. We're talking about something going into legend. We're talking about something that was never originally God.
Right, and you may as well just be teaching Paul Bunyan for all that's worth.
Exactly, and there really isn't a lot of difference in that. I mean, I got into an argument with a creationist recently where I said, okay, what you just told me about what your beliefs sounds to me not really any different than telling me that the Rio Grande River was dug by Pecos Bill. It's kind of the same idea.
Yeah, they're all those Southwestern legends. But yeah, I mean, and actually on that note of Pecos Bill carving the Rio Grande, we have creationists who do believe in the literal Noah's flood, and that the flood that lasted for just a matter of months carved out the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, and this brings me back to a point that I didn't make earlier because I get so sidetracked all the time. You can honestly believe in creation. An honest person can believe in creation, but not when they meet someone like me and then they want to argue to defend that position, because as I said, it's not possible to defend creationism honestly. If you get into a discussion with somebody who knows both the religion and the science at the same time, then you're very quickly going to have to make a choice. You're going to have to decide whether to remain honest or whether to remain creationist, because it will no longer be possible to be both.
Right.
And I've frequently, repeatedly seen people go the other direction. Like I told you before, where people said, I'm just going to believe what I want to believe, or why can't I believe what I want to believe? And they would say this after I've disproved something that they tell me they're going to go ahead and keep believing anyway, even when they now know that it's wrong.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. I mean, do they know it's wrong? Or do you think that maybe because they have grown up with the creationist mindset, that when you do explain the facts and you do explain the science to them, that it just kind of goes over their head? Or do you think that it's willful, or do you just think that it's
willful?
Okay.
It's make-believe. It's deliberately pretending. As I said, you can honestly believe this, but when you have to make a choice to be dishonest, you now have to start deceiving yourself.
Right. And the problem with that is the second that they have changed the subject after you've given them information that contradicts and just dismantles the previous argument they were making, they've already forgotten that argument was dismantled, and then they'll turn around and just give it to someone else.
That's the key difference, from my perspective at least, that's the key difference between their perception of what scientific theory is and their ideas of their own theories. Because that's not how scientific theory works at all. Scientific theory is, oh, this is me disproving your point, and the other person going, oh, you're absolutely correct. Now I have to come up with a new theory of how this actually works.
I don't even think it's that rational. They're just simply, because I've had the same thing where, the same person brings the same argument you've already disproved, and you can pull up in previous discussions that you've had where you've already proven that wrong. And don't you remember when you and I talked before? Here's the timestamp. Right there is here's the cut and paste of that conversation, or a screenshot of that conversation. You were wrong then. What makes you think you can use the same argument now? But every time I get into arguments with these creationists, they always say, well, how come there's no transitional species? Really? You've been arguing with what you call evolutionists for years. You've been owning them for years, as you say, and you've never mentioned that there's no transitional species. Nobody's ever been able to give you a list of transitional species. That's why I made the video. The ninth foundational falsehood of creationism lists over 300 transitional species according to the strictest definition of that word. And when I got a creationist organization to understand that they had posted a definition that was actually accurate, they had accurately described what a transitional species is, and then in the same breath said that no such example of this exists, I presented a documented list of 300 of those examples that meets every criteria they just mentioned, and said, now how do you address that? All of these 300 examples meet exactly what you just gave that definition. So will you now correct your misstatement and admit that hundreds exist? And they refused, saying that to do that would be a slippery slope to make them such that they would have to admit that a transitional species exists and evolution is real, and they're not allowed to believe that evolution is real. So they're allowed to lie.
Oh.
And that's what it's all about.
That sounds like a really good basis for your life and your viewpoint.
Yeah, well, so in all of the whole book, The Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism, covers things like that there's no transitional species. Yes, there are, and here's a list. And then there's no beneficial mutations. Yes, there are, and here's the documentation to back that up. It's only a theory. No, that's my 15th chapter. That's the one that annoys me the most. And it starts with the first foundational falsehood of creationism is the idea that you have to be either a creationist or an atheist, that you can't be a Christian who accepts science, when in fact that's most people. Most people have an overlap of religious beliefs and scientific acceptance. Right. It used to be the common position was that everybody understood that science is real, and yet they would have this notion that when they die, they have a spirit that goes somewhere. Everybody had like both of these beliefs at the same time. But now we have a very polarized country, because people are walking away from religious beliefs altogether, which is good, fine. But then you also have people that are walking away from science altogether, and all kinds of rationality all at once. So you don't just have people who are creationists who deny evolution. They also deny deep time, so that they're now young Earth creationists. They're denying everything that solidly proves that the Earth is more than 6,000 years old. I mean, they're going to deny everything. And now they want to be geocentrists too, so that they think that the Earth is the center of the universe. And then to make it even worse, they think that the Earth is flat.
Yeah.
Why? Because the Magic Book of Fables says so.
Hooray for the
And it doesn't
NBA.
matter that the Magic Book of Fables is wrong about everything. Absolutely wrong about absolutely everything, 100% of the time.
Right. And yeah. And so, when you've got this book that clearly isn't science, and you are really trying to just kind of wedge it into, fit it into kind of scientific models, if you will, then you start getting people who are trying to teach creationism in schools and educating a whole new generation of morons that believe that snakes talk and
you got to admit it's getting worse.
It seems like it is. I mean, I can remember being a Christian, and I can remember going to school and not really dealing with my faith at school. I dealt with school at school, and then when I went to church on Sunday and Wednesday and holidays and other days, that's when I dealt with my beliefs, and that's when I dealt with the Bible. But now it just seems like there's this desperate push to get the Bible back in schools, and I just don't really understand it.
Yeah, and when you're getting to the point where you deny that dinosaurs ever existed, and you deny that gravity exists, because, hey, gravity's only a theory, right? So now you can believe in a flat Earth? And it doesn't even matter when there's a solar eclipse running across the country. You're going to believe in a flat Earth anyway.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering how they square... So how a biblical literalist would square an eclipse with the idea that the sun and the moon are both lights that God put in the sky, right?
Yeah, and just everything about the way the Bible describes the Earth in relation to the rest of the cosmos is wrong. Absolutely everything. The Bible describes the Earth as flat. It describes it as being covered by a giant crystal dome. The Earth is divided into 4 quadrants, which are sometimes mistranslated as corners. So it's not the 4 corners of the Earth; it's the 4 quadrants: north, south, east, west. This firmament is described as being like solid molten glass or crystal, so that you can see right through it, but it's solid. The Bible says it's solid, and that it has windows in it to let the water in, because space is full of water, and the sun and the moon and the stars are all inside this dome. They're not beyond it; they're inside it.
Right.
Along with the clouds. So the sun is not a star. The stars are smaller than the sun. The sun and the moon are the same size, and they're both equal somehow.
Yeah,
so, literally everything.
They have different jobs. I mean, come on.
Yeah, everything that the Bible describes. The Bible's not just wrong scientifically and historically. It's wrong ethically and morally. It's absolutely wrong about absolutely everything. It really, really is. Yeah. Even if you could find some, and there is, there is a moment of wisdom to be found in the Bible. Ecclesiastes 3:18-21. Everything other than that is a contradiction of that. So there's places where you might be able to find the lipstick on a pig, where you find, this one little quote is nice, isn't it? And I say, oh yeah, but then turn the page or look at the previous paragraph.
Right.
Or what does
just
it say in the
one or
next
two
chapter?
Verses before and after it. I mean,
yeah, because God said, and God didn't say anything. This is men. This is the ignorant, superstitious primitives that are pretending to speak for God. This isn't God's word. This is people who don't know shit making it up.
Right. And it's clear. The more that we understand about the world, it becomes more and more clear that the Bible is just a book of fables.
Yes, exactly.
So coming back to the mention of religion in schools and creationism in schools, you and your wife have spoken multiple times in front of school boards when we're talking about the, evolution.
And we've also testified at the Capitol.
Yes. I watched those videos. And what I'm wondering, just to get a feeling from you, like when you are standing there talking to these people and that they would rather teach the Bible than a science book or any other book, really, what is it like? What does that feel like being in front of those people?
The way that they lie without compunction. They're so open about it. It's stunning to me that truth really blatantly does not matter. It doesn't matter what you can say. See, like a science-minded person is not going to state a fact that is not evidently a fact or is not evidently true. Because in order to be a fact, you have to be able to show that the statement is true. That's what truth is. Truth is what the facts are, right? So I can't state that something is a fact if I can't show that it is verifiably accurate. But religious people will just take whatever subjective impression they have, and because they believe it with their whole heart, I'm sorry that you're stupid with your whole head that you would believe this, but that doesn't make it a fact. So it's the misrepresentation of everything, you know. And as I said, every logical fallacies, falsehoods, and frauds. That's all that it is. The Book of Mormon is fraudulent. The Bible is fraudulent. All of these holy books are adaptations of other people's earlier mythology. You know, just with some of the similar stories blended in because they're just popular elements. There's not a word of truth to it. My next presentation, the next time I give a public speech, I'm going to be talking about what the Bible should say. If an actual divine being really wrote the damn thing, it wouldn't read anything like it does.
Right.
It wouldn't say anything that it does. But here's some of the things it should fucking say.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, anybody can kind of just think through this. I mean, anybody, honestly. If you were going to posit that the Bible is the inerrant word of an all-knowing deity who created everything, then it would be so easy to say, okay, fine, what does it say about slaves? What does it say about bacteria? What does it say about, I mean, just pick something, just anything. Like, what does it say about space travel?
Yeah.
All right. So one other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, and I don't want to take up all your free time, is your Texas Senate race. And that is just incredibly interesting to me.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, we are having a little bit of problem getting started because there's a lot of money involved.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not even talking about a lot of money like regular people do it because I'm doing on the cheap. You know, there are candidates like today. I got mailers from other people running for office. I can't afford to send mailers out to people, say, hey, vote for me. That's a great idea, but I need donations in order to be able to do that. So, I mean, I have a website, aronra.org, not the one aronra.com, but just aronra.org. There is a donation link there, and I do need all the support I can get. And I can only accept support from American citizens. You can be an American citizen anywhere in the world. And here's another surprising thing. Texas politics is so corrupt that there's no limit on how much money any American citizen can donate to my campaign. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you've got it, you could send it over and it just,
Yeah,
but there's no limit. You can donate just ridiculous, stupid amounts of money. And now that we no longer have the Johnson Amendment, that means that our mega churches become super PACs.
Right.
So that means that the Tea Party believer who I'm running against in November of 2018, provided I make it through the primary, the Tea Party believer is obviously going to be backed by all these churches, right?
Right.
So I'm now facing tens of millions or hundreds of millions. We have 90 plus mega churches just in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And a mega church is one where the church congregation is in multiple thousands. Yeah, but since you asked me about this, I mean, we were talking about all this, religion bashing, and then we start talking about the politics. And I want people to understand that my atheism is not related directly to my campaign. Now, I say not directly because there's no better defender of First Amendment than an atheist activist, and I don't just mean the freedom of religion, right? Although there certainly is that too. Christians don't understand the Prohibition Clause or they don't understand the First Amendment at all. They're going against the whole thing: the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the freedom to peaceably assemble, the freedom of the press, and so forth. We see all of this under attack.
Right.
So, I mean, as a secular activist, I better understand this than any of my religious counterparts. But there are a number of policies where I'm convinced that the right thing to do, or the better way to solve most of our problems, is to do the exact opposite of everything the GOP wants to do. So I'm for, I don't want there to be private prisons anymore. I want to decriminalize marijuana. I don't want a wall. I want to get revenue. So I want us to have the same advantages as all the states that have legalized marijuana and suddenly turned everything around and dropped their crime rates and their suicide rates and brought in a whole lot of extra money. And what happens if the entire country does that? Well, then would you need a wall to keep out the drug cartels? Well, there wouldn't be any drug cartels because we're the ones growing our own stuff and regulating it. So it's now safer and better.
Right.
And we don't have the crime. And the crime wouldn't be there anymore either. So what are the drug lords going to be doing if we're growing our own weed? Sorry, we've just ruined your whole market. Now you're going to have to get an honest living.
Yeah.
So everything that the Republicans want to do, and Republicans want to make America great again by taking away everything that made America great. And part of that was that the idea was that if people could flee religious persecution from other countries and they could come to this country where we have a secular government, where there is no dominant religion. There's going to be one religion that's more popular among the populace than anyone else, but none of them have legal rights over any other. So you don't have a state endorse any particular denomination of Christianity, because that means all the other denominations become subservient to that one.
Right.
So with a secular government, which of course I'm firmly for, then you have an even playing field. So all these people can flee religious persecution. They would be immigrants, you understand, but they would be coming here for that American dream, that it's now the even playing field, so that it now becomes up to them to be successful, right? So it's all on them. It's not their environment anymore. It's what they can do. That's the American dream. And it's fitting, I think, that Trump said that the American dream is dead, because he's the one who killed it.
Well, his party started killing it long before he became a candidate.
No doubt. No, I've been a political activist in the state for 20 years, and I've noticed since the Reagan years how things have been trying to eliminate the middle class. And here's the thing. What made America great was that we had a higher standard of living than anybody else. And I've spoken to people who were raised in the Soviet Union, who identified as communists, and who said that the thing that won the Cold War was not our military superiority, because they don't believe we ever had military superiority. They think they're tougher than we are. What beat them in the Cold War was color television, because communists were making sacrifices. Everybody's making these sacrifices and living in the level that they are for the common good. But they're seeing movies, they're seeing television that, American movies and TV get everywhere. So they are seeing that we were living better than them. We were living better than anyone. And that's what made America great. We had a better standard of living. Why? Because we had the middle class. And the GOP wants to eliminate that. So they have ways of making the rich richer and making the poor poorer, and creating this division so that there is no middle class anymore, which will render us to be effectively a third world country.
Yeah.
And so I want to bolster the middle class. I'm also all for science. I'm really concerned about, where we're going with this denial of science. It's scary. I want people to be elected for their actual ability to lead, and not because they believe absolute horse shit for no reason. If you elect people to be judges or sovereign leaders because they are firm in their faith and strong in their convictions, then you're electing somebody who's closed-minded and who has already judged your case before they heard the details and isn't going to change their mind because of any evidence you present. I would rather we elect somebody who is willing to consider the information before making their judgment, or even if they've had a preconception, realizing, hey, you know what, I thought this at first, but now that I've heard the evidence, I realize I'm wrong. I'm going to change my mind and rule differently. That's the way a judge or a leader should be.
And it's really important that people like you are actually able to get into offices like this, where at the very least, obviously you can't change things on your own, but if you can get in there and you can present the evidence and you can present good arguments and you can present the humanist stance to these people who are just freaking nuts, then maybe you can tone them down a little bit. Maybe you can rein them in a little bit. Maybe you can kind of win some converts for humanity.
Yeah, I can't get any publicity out because I don't have the money to do that. So, we have, there's a number of, like I said, there's a number of things that we have to buy, and kind of all at once. So before I can really get my campaign launched, I do need money. And I'm sorry that I happen to live in America where this is required, and I wish we could get money out of politics. And I'm not expecting the kinds of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands that other people want me to get. But in order to do this campaign at all, I'm going to need a few more thousand than we have right now.
Right.
So anybody that can donate, please, aronra.org.
Yep, aronra.org. And I'll tell you what, we are definitely going to be pitching in to help you out. And anybody who is in our very small, so far, listener base, go to aronra.org and just pitch in a little bit. Nobody's asking you to take a second mortgage out, but we definitely need voices like Aron's in
I'll take your $27.
Yeah. Hey, I got $27.
And that's all I'm hoping for.
All right. Well, we're going to try and get the word out. I think that it's very, very important that we get some voices of reason at all levels of government. And we can start here.
Outstanding.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to talk to us. And it has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll catch up to you soon, and we'll get to hang out and chat a little bit more.
Yeah, this was fun, so I appreciate it.
All right.
It was nice talking to you, Aron.
All right, you too.
I've seen so many debates and blog posts where creationists argue against evolution using the same old bullshit. They all run together into an unintelligible stream of Klingon. I mean, how many times can you hear the words bacterial flagellum before your eyes glaze over? This component of the argument for irreducible complexity is held as an example of something that must be so perfectly designed to do what it does, because if you remove one or more parts, it doesn't do that thing anymore. The thing is, that's not true. It's been demolished by scientists, and I still guarantee that you'll hear about the bacterial flagellum again anyway. All of the creationist arguments have been debunked long ago, and just like they cling to the Bible, they clutch these little nonsense talking points to their chest like Gollum with the One Ring. Creationist arguments are their precious, and we're trying to take them to Mount Doom without help from the Eagles. The reason they can't let go of these arguments is because they don't have anything else. The entire creationist stance on the world is vapid, and it couldn't possibly show more prominently than when they're sticking their fingers in their ears, refusing to hear that every scientific breakthrough from which they've benefited, every medicine, every piece of technology that allows them to spread their nonsense to everybody with internet access, all say they're wrong. They're just wrong. And I think they know it, but they're so invested in their religion, and they've spent so much time convincing themselves it's true, they'll never be able to admit it. Aside from wanting it to be true, there's no reason for them to even think it might be. Look, I get it. I was once a why are there still monkeys creationist as well. I argued for Noah's flood and the Tower of Babel. I wanted it to be true because that meant I wasn't wasting my time. I wanted it to be true because that meant I was right. It's a good feeling to be right. It really is. It's not a good feeling to be willfully ignorant, though. And that's where I eventually came down on the side of rationality and reason and science. Once I realized I was hanging on to strange beliefs just because they'd always been my beliefs, I had to acknowledge that they weren't worth hanging on to. They didn't get me anywhere, and they didn't align with the reality in which I found myself once I left the shelter of my religious home. I eventually realized that in order to perpetuate these horrible arguments, I would have to lie to myself. I want my world to make sense, and sometimes it just doesn't. I accept that. And I accept that I don't know is going to be my answer for a lot of things. But I also realize that I don't know is a hell of a lot more honest than, well, it's because of an invisible person. Invisible people aren't solving our problems. Invisible people aren't telling us the truth, and neither are creationists. When someone claims to have the ultimate answer for everything, and it sounds like magic, you can be damn sure they're misinformed, ignorant, or just plain lying. Now, if creationists were just lying to themselves, we wouldn't have to care. They could delude themselves and believe whatever they want. They aren't, though. They're teaching this to their children, and they're trying to teach it to yours. They're creating generations of ignorant, lying creationists. It's not just an innocent eccentricity we can ignore. We can't just look at them and say, "Oh, isn't it cute how this person believes this?" No, we have to fight this. It's stupid and dangerous. Our future depends on this going away. Random verse.
Random verse.
Random verse.
Random
verse. Our random verse this week comes from the Qur'an in Surah 27:61.
And Dad's gonna rap it this time.
Is not he who made the earth a fixed abode, and placed rivers in the folds thereof, and placed firm hills therein, and hath set a barrier between the two seas? Is there any God beside Allah? Nay, but most of them know not.
Okay, yes. I'm a little confused.
I don't know what you're confused about. I mean, the earth is fixed.
Fixed.
It's perfectly
It can't have children?
stationary. I don't think it's fixed that way. I mean, the Earth is pretty fertile. But anyway, apparently the Earth has folds. Maybe it's like a brain. Maybe they're saying the Earth is a brain.
It has folds and it's fixed.
Yeah. Like your brain is fixed in your head and it has folds.
And firm hills.
Boobs.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like the Earth is just a curvy woman at this point.
The Earth is a curvy woman.
And hath set a barrier between the two seas.
Like her eyes are like deep pools of water.
No, you broke it.
The barrier could be your nose.
Nope, you broke it. All right, so he, in this case, if this is pulled from the Qur'an, is referring to Allah. He made the earth a fixed abode, and placed rivers in the folds thereof, and placed firm hills therein, and hath set a barrier between the two seas. What is the barrier between the two seas? Land?
Land, yeah.
Okay. So basically it's just saying Allah created the earth and there's no other gods. And some people think that there are other gods, but they're silly and foolish.
Yeah.
Fair, I guess.
I guess. I mean, there are plenty of gods. I guess it's just saying that, none of them are real. Like, they're all imaginary.
Allah.
Every single god is imaginary except for Allah. He's real.
The one true God.
The one actual real god.
The god of curvy women.
Ooh, I kind of like this god.
Well, you wouldn't like this god if you knew that the curvy women were all covered up with burqas.
Well, how would you know they were curvy then?
You wouldn't. That's the point. All of the women are just women.
Well, all women are just women.
That's a generalization and blanket terminology. I'm offended.
Are you saying that I'm wrong that women are not women?
No, women are humans. We're all humans.
But we're not all women.
Equal rights.
To work on your Venn diagrams.
It's not a Venn diagram, it's a vector. We're moving forward. This is progressive.
I don't even know what you're talking about now.
Oh, man. Well, then you clearly are just not with the program.
Yeah, apparently not.
But
seriously, if you look at creation language among a lot of different religions, the earth being fixed and stationary is a common theme.
Because they thought that the earth did not rotate or move at all. Everything rotated around the earth.
Yep.
Hashtag science. Hashtag disproven. Hashtag roasted as hell. Get it? Because it's religion. Well,
yeah, so the funny thing about this is that you can see the pre-scientific view of the world. So, like we just said, they thought that the Earth was stationary and everything else revolved around it. Now, I don't know if there's any expansion on this whole thing in the Quran, but in the Old Testament, there is actually a verse that says that the sun and the moon are both lights. And one of them was bright to light the day, and the other one was not quite as bright so that you could get some sleep at night. But it's funny how, when you consider the time period and you consider our level of knowledge at the time, that you could have these stories that are different, but really, really similar.
Yeah, and then science came along and bamboozled everyone.
Heckin' bamboozled.
Heckin' bamboozled. Yeah.
And then the other common theme, obviously, is that your God in the book that you're writing is the only actual God and all of the other ones are fake. And the people who don't believe in the only God that's in your book are just stupid and dumb. They're dumbheads.
Yeah, dumb, stupid heads.
No, stupid dumbheads.
Oh, right. Sorry, because those aren't synonymous.
They're absolutely not. Words matter.
You hear that, all you dumb, stupid heads? You're not as bad as the stupid, dumb heads.
That's right. Actually, I would be friends with a dumb, stupid head.
I mean, yeah, it seems like there's an analogy somewhere on the tip of my tongue, and I just can't put my fingers around it and verbalize it, but it's there. I'm trying to relate this to other common themes in the world where basically somebody is super possessive of their beliefs and they're like, everybody else is wrong. Which I guess could pretty much be any, controversial viewpoint with somebody who's super pig-headed and not willing to accept other people's viewpoints, but...
Yeah. Well, I mean, you get beliefs like this where, we talked about in our belief episode the whole Sasquatch and alien abduction stuff. And moon landing hoaxes and, 9/11 truthers all have this dogged notion in their head that they will defend despite the overwhelming abundance of evidence to the contrary. And it's very religious in its structure, some of these weird beliefs that people can hold.
Agreed.
But yeah, creationists are exactly that type of person. Like, you can't really say anything to dissuade them from the view that magic happened and the earth is magic.
Fair enough. All right. So if you had to rate this verse, would you give it what would you rate this verse on a scale of 2 folds to 4 firm hills?
I'd give it a burkini. Yeah, a solid burkini.
No. Oh man. All right. So a solid burkini goes to Surah 2761. Oh dear.
This week, with Texas recovering from Hurricane Harvey and Florida preparing for Hurricane Irma, I'd like to invite you to donate whatever you can to rescue and recovery efforts. I'm personally a fan of the Foundation Beyond Belief's Humanist Disaster Recovery Team. You can find them and make donations or even join the team at foundationbeyondbelief.org/HDR teams. Until next week, if you have questions or comments, please send us an email to podcast@waywardwillis.com. Intro music was provided by Austin Colon and used with permission. You can find more of Austin's music linked in the show notes. This podcast is a media production of Willisware LLC, all rights reserved.
This has been The Wayward Willis. If you liked what you just heard and you want more of Jon and Logan, you can follow us on Twitter @WaywardWillis, Facebook at facebook.com/TheWaywardWillis, or at willisweb.com. If you want to help the show and have a few extra dollars, you can donate per episode or per month on Patreon at patreon.com/wayward. We'll be back next week.